Hello and welcome to another Lotus Box video. This is Zach Kiihne, and I'm here Wednesday morning. It is right after deckless submissions for the Rivals League split, and I just wanted to go over how I came to my decision and some of the processes involved with testing for this current standard. So, this current standard is fairly complicated in that there's a lot of decks, and a lot of them have strengths and weaknesses. No deck beats everything. Just we have to start from there. I know previous standards have had things like Omnath or Team of Reclamation or Oko decks that just beat everything. That is no longer the case. So we kind of have to map out all the matchups of all the major decks and use that to understand what the metagame looks like and where we are in the metagame. Because when there's no deck that beats everything, you can kind of expect standard to cycle. So here I've grouped there's 6 decks that I would consider potentially tier 1 depending on the metagame and where it's at. And of those 6, I've grouped them into 3 different sections based off of what they beat or lose to. So first we have the green decks. So this is mono green food and green black adventures, which is kind of where the format started out. These green decks beat the mill decks. These mill decks are red black Kroxa and blue black Rogues. Kroxa aims to mill itself and bring back an early Kroxa. Rogues aims to mill the opponent and enable their good cards, such as Into the Story or Drown in the Lock, as well as their Rogues. The reason that these green decks beat the mill decks is because they have Scavenging Ooze, or specifically against Rogues, they have Chainweb Arachnir. So this is kind of where the format started, with these green decks beating out the mill decks. And as a result, we had this third type of deck rise, the Yorion decks, which began with blue-white Yorion, which is kind of what you would expect. It's 80 cards, blue and white cards, almost this control plan. The green decks don't have an effective counterplay, so the Yorion decks were able to beat out these green decks and kind of suppress them. Green-white Yorion is another variant. It's closer to a green deck than a Yorion deck, so as you'd expect, it beats the graveyard decks better, but it's not favored against blue-white. Here's just some examples of the stock lists for green, black, and mono green food. Um, both of them are just trying to, play this mid-range game plan. They have card advantage engines in Edgewall Innkeeper and Trail of Crumbs. They have big dorky creatures like Kazandu Mammoth or Wicked Wolf or Feasting Troll King, or these adventure creatures, and they're just trying to play creatures, play removal spells, draw some cards, and eventually win the game that way. The issue for them is that this game plan doesn't really work against blue-white because they don't have an effective way of stopping the card Yorion, which, when it's cast from blue-white, is going to be like draw 3 cards, exile 2 of your permanents. When it's blinking ECD or Skyclave Apparition, and then it's getting looped with Charming Prince. So even though they might be able to remove it, they can't really stop it from turning the game around. But these green decks can beat the mill decks, so let's take a look at those. These mill decks are graveyard based. For the blue-black one, it's their graveyard. For the red-black one, it's your graveyard. And they are generally pretty efficient. So the red-black deck, for example, is full of all of these 2-mana 1-for-1s, as well as these 4-mana cards, which let you, again, trade 1-for-1. And its plan is kind of just to trade with your opponent until they're ahead because they are able to turn 5 of their cards into Kroxa. You see Mire Triton and Tamarite Calls the Dead as additional ways of enabling your Kroxa. Kroxa is probably the best card in Standard on sheer power level. Its twin Uro has been banned, so Kroxa is left. Even though he is significantly worse than Uro, he is still much better than the rest of Standard. And then we have Rogues. So Rogues is a Lurrus deck, has it as its companion, and Rogues is like this Delver Fish style deck where all its cards are 1 or 2 mana, unless of course it's Into the Story, which, well, it says 7 up here, really costs 4 mana, because you've milled your opponent for 8, and now you just have a 4 mana draw 4. You're able to continue to trade 1 for 1 or play cheap threats, and then you just refuel with 4 mana draw 4. The weakness of this deck is the escape mechanic. So that's why Red-Black Kroxa is good against it, because they just have 4 Kroxa. That's why the green decks are good against it, because they have 4 Chainweb Arachniers. And that's why the Yorion decks aren't good against it, because they don't have really good escape cards. And as a result, the Rogues deck can kind of fish them out. So they can just counter their spells, kill their creatures, and eventually win with like 1 mana 3/2s or 2/3s and such. Finally, the Yorion decks. So we have blue-white, which is the more stock thing, which is just, it's 80 cards, so you can have Yorion as your companion. And it's all the cards you'd expect. It's Omen of the Sea, it's Charming Prince, it's Birth of Meletus, Solemn, Skyclave Apparition, all these cards that you can blink and get value. The real basis of the deck and why it's white specifically is Skyclave Apparition and Elspeth Conquers Death. These cards are the best cards to blink because they affect the board. Because once you ECD something, if you then just blink it, usually it is game over. Unless of course you're playing against rogues, in which case they don't have anything else to ECD. But it just means that you're able to pull ahead and answer your opponent's board while progressing yours and gaining card advantage. The green-white version is, again, closer to a green deck. We can see the Scavenging Oozes and Chain Webs, which means you'll be good against rogues. And it plays the food package of Gilded Goose, Trail of Crumbs, and Wicked Wolf. All of these cards are good to blink with Yorion, but because these cards, you need to draw them together. Like a Trail of Crumbs on its own is not nearly as good as a Trail of Crumbs with Gilded Goose or Wicked Wolf. As a result, it does not play Yorion as a companion. They need to keep to 60 in order to have these synergies available to them. So, again, it's going to lose to blue-white, but it's going to be better versus rogues and still beat these other green decks with the ECD Yorion loop. So now if we go back to the chart, going into the weekend, I expect a lot of Yorion decks. That's the most hyped deck on Twitter. And while I of course expect a lot of specifically blue-white, there's also other variants I would expect, so green-white or Mardu or black-white or Esper or whatever. But all of these Yorion decks are going to end up in this box. And as a result of that, I don't think these green decks are playable. I would love to play mono green food, but it's just too bad a matchup for blue-white, so I can't. So I can't play any of these green decks. I expect other competitors to feel similarly. I also expect other competitors to figure out that blue-black rogues is good against Yorion. Blue-black rogues is also just a deck that people love. People love this fish style deck, the blue decks. You know, cheap cards. It's really nice. It's really fun. And it's really good. So I would expect these two to be the most played decks by a significant margin. Probably combined to make up like 60+% of the metagame. So, as a result, I have chosen to play Red-Black Kroxa. It's good against the Rogues decks because of Kirksa. It's good against the Yorion decks because you can trade 1-for-1 and get under them. And it's just a powerful deck in general. Kirksa is the best card in Standard. Robber of the Rich is an addition to the deck that's different from stock, and it's for Yorion. It's so that you can have these aggressive 2-drops to really beat out the opponent, because playing a Crux on turn 2 isn't really what you want to be doing. You really want to be able to start attacking, even if it's a Mire Triton. But Robber of the Rich really lets you get that ball rolling and attacking them. In addition, because they're so slow and a lot of their 2-drops draw a card, you're often able to trigger it on the draw even. You don't have to be on the play, which you do for like all the green decks. And because I don't expect those green decks, I can play something like this, which otherwise would be awful against them. So, as you can see, I kind of tried to understand the structure of the metagame and break it down into its components, and then apply what I thought was going to happen with the metagame, with what people played, to that understanding. So by doing so, I didn't have to worry about, oh, is X deck good or Y deck good. I just knew where they fit, and I knew if I wanted to brew something up, where it would fit within the metagame. So if I had something that maybe I thought beat Blue-White Yorion, I could look and see how it would face off against green decks or against mill decks. And if it lost to both, or lost to mill decks, then I kind of knew where it fit in the whole jigsaw. And I could know that it's just better in that case to just play Blue-White Yorion yourself, because you're still going to beat and lose to the same decks, but, you know, it's I'd rather be playing this mirror and not lose to like green-white Yorion. So hopefully that was educational, and you can kind of understand my thought process and apply it to other metagames as well as this one. So if in the future you want to try and solve this metagame, and maybe it's shifted away from blue-white towards black-red as a result of this weekend, you can see that you might want to play mono-green food, for example. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. All that.